So with that, we will go ahead and begin. So agenda for this particular type of webinar that we're doing today is to do a Teams Enterprise Voice overview of the core feature sets, as well as general call flow and planning, integrating with on-premise devices, as well as calling plans and integrations thereby with third-party devices as well. Basic Teams versus Enterprise Voice feature sets. It's a question we get asked a lot, and I want to make sure that everybody's clear on how that actually works and what the differences are between the core version of Teams and what Enterprise Voice adds. Then we're also going to take some time to go over the advanced Teams feature sets that are available, some of the pricing and licensing requirements that are there and options for you to customize your individual Teams deployments, as well as our proven process with many of our clients on how we've actually implemented, tested, and deployed Enterprise Voice with regards to the organizations. Okay, and before we go into who is Oakwood here, just want to do short introductions. My name is Michael Kaler. I'm the Director of the Intelligent Cloud and Infrastructure Division here at Oakwood. I also have on the line Todd Rhodes, who is my Senior Engineer for Azure and Enterprise Voice as well, and he'll be doing our demo a little bit later on. Oakwood is a company, for those of you that haven't talked to us before on scoping calls or whatnot, we've been in here since 1981, been primarily a Microsoft shop. Multiple gold competencies in 10 different areas, a lot of focus in the Office 365 cloud space and actually on-prem as well, in a very myriad array of areas. As you guys can see there on the right-hand side, the 10 gold competencies that we have that are the primary ones that we use in our partnership with Microsoft, as well as up below above that, many of the services that we do offer on the cloud and infrastructure side of the business. This is not limited to the entirety of the company. We do have other divisions that do other work, but this has been the main focus of the cloud and infrastructure division and a lot of the services that we provide. Moving on from there, we actually offer a lot of different areas as well as far as the company goes. With a gold certified partnership that we have in all of our divisions, we offer managed services, both from an application and infrastructure standpoint, support of cloud migrations, both with regards to Office 365, Microsoft Azure, as well as third-party cloud. Application modernization, I know it's been pretty popular this year with everything going the way it is right now in the world state with the pandemic. A lot of people are looking to move applications up into the cloud or go with a virtual workforce. So transferring those apps from your standard IaaS type platform into PaaS is very important and becoming very popular. Data analytics as well, where we'll analyze the data and do a lot of Power BI work around that. Modern workplace, again, very popular, especially this year with regards to rolling out, virtual workspaces for people and securing those devices down as people begin to work further and further remote. Azure Cloud Solutions Provider, we actually do have a CSP provider services where we can help with licensing as well as the myriad of Microsoft services and products with regards to managing that Microsoft relationship. And last but certainly not least, Azure DevOps deployments as well as administration and administration as well. Okay. Here's an example of some of the partners that clients that we have done work for in the past. Many of these we have done enterprise voice deployments, as well as larger engagements with Microsoft Azure and Office 365 as well. This has been over the last couple of years in both the Kansas City and St. Louis markets. And then talking about Oakwood's approach and how we actually handle certain types of projects, our methodology when going into a project, especially with an enterprise voice or say an Azure project, is always end-to-end. It's usually multiple faceted, where we're looking at what you as a company want to accomplish. Is it simply testing out a DR solution? Is it testing out enterprise voice to see if it might be a viable hybrid option or an option to completely convert an old and aging phone system into the new technologies of a PSTN phone system that's available today. We do take a project-based approach on that with regards to how it's planned out and how it's scoped out for everybody. We do have several experts on the team with our expert sourcing. Todd and myself are among those who have done hundreds of enterprise voice deployments with regards to smaller organizations all the way up to large enterprise deployments of hundreds and thousands of users with multiple sites. One of the biggest approaches that I always like to bring up with a lot of our clients is we do take a collaborative approach. Myself and my team and make sure that we are part of your team. Talk with, members of your team, your engineers, whiteboarding sessions. Just make sure it's fully involved so that not only you're understanding what we're recommending, but that, if you should decide that you want to manage the solution going forward, in your own individual teams, that you would be able to do so and know exactly how things were changed, how things were built, just to allow that collaborative type of effort, with allowing obviously strategic and management consulting as well, as we do have engagement managers and project managers that assist in the process for any engagement that we do. On the right-hand side there, you will see our 4 primary divisions. I touched base on those a little bit earlier, but it goes over a lot of the different areas that we cover in many facets of the Microsoft space, and even outside the Microsoft space to some degree. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead and move on into the actual Teams voice content. So with this webinar, I wanted to make a big distinction. So Teams core functionalities, you will see on the left-hand side there, is slightly different from Teams Enterprise Voice. Teams core feature set is what's called their collaboration suite, and it involves these 5 main key points here: client-to-client calls, Teams meetings, client-to-client chat, SharePoint integrations, and OneDrive for business integrations. So all of these do not require standard phone system integration. They don't require PBX integration, phone numbers, calling plans, anything like that. Client-to-client communications, either through calls or chat, are done on a software-based TCP type of connection, much like you would do with anything you would do with any software you have on your computer. Teams meetings, when they're a standard Teams meeting, is simply a client connection, whether somebody's joining in with a Teams client locally loaded on a device, or whether they're loading the web app through the browser and loading it through that methodology. Teams also has very heavy integrations into SharePoint and OneDrive. As a matter of fact, all teams and channels themselves, as far as a file storage and collaboration session goes, is actually stored in SharePoint. It's simply a specially configured SharePoint site that's actually very specific for Teams, has very specific nomenclature on the back end, very specific IDs as far as how it's done. So it's not handled the same as a standard SharePoint site. And then OneDrive, obviously, for personal storage and storage for individual users and sharing across for collaboration in team sites as well as individual chats. On the enterprise voice side, this is considered a feature set add-on. And this is where you're able to make calls to any landline or cell phone in the world, obviously if they have phone routability, ability to bring any landline or cell phone into Teams meetings, full call center functionality. This does include a large, ever-evolving set of feature sets, including auto attendance, call queuing. They do allow for hunt groups, special types of call setups with regards to music on hold, and we'll go through many of those features here in some of the following slides. It does allow for adjustable call flow paths. So for those of you who have organizations who want to be able to modify your call path or messaging to clients, whether it be day of the week, whether users are available or not, or whether or not it's off hours or holidays, absolutely fully customizable. Allow meeting attendees to dial in. So this is a big difference between Teams meetings and allowing you to have a conferencing feature set. So with Teams meetings, you have to use either the web client or Teams locally loaded client to be able to join a call. However, with conferencing, you're now able to host a conferencing number and a bridge where people can dial in with any device that uses standard telephone capabilities and be able to join those meetings from an audio perspective as well. One of the big points we'll be talking about later today as well is integrate with current phone providers or use Microsoft calling plans. So something that people don't really realize is there are some options to integrate into current phone systems that you might have on-prem. And we'll go over some use cases here in a little bit and reasons why you might want to do that. All right, moving on to the next one. So Teams Enterprise Voice overview from a high level. So obviously we talked about some of this stuff in the previous slide, but this one goes a little bit more in depth as far as how that actually works. So if you're using Office 365 directly and Microsoft Teams strictly by itself, this is where you'll integrate your users in with the Microsoft Office 365 phone system. They will obviously have numbers or have the capability to host numbers, whether they're doing conferencing or some of the advanced feature sets that are available. As well as allowing you to make your standard PSTN phone calls between users, between outside entities and inside. However, like I mentioned earlier, there are options to integrate with on-premise if you have an SBC device, a session border controller device, or a third-party PBX telephony equipment system. Most of them are actually supported to use what's called direct routing, which allows you to make a hybrid connection between your on-premise devices and Office 365. Okay. Moving on from there. So the calling plan, if you're using Microsoft Teams strictly from a cloud-only overview, you're not integrating with anything on-prem other than your devices. So one of the things that Microsoft Teams does allow you to do is flexibility, as you can see in this diagram, of how you use your devices. You can have Teams loaded directly on a mobile device if you wish, on a computer, or have an actual handset. And we have a lot of clients, including us here internally, that use a wide mix of that. You might have a soft client loaded on your computer where you have a headset, either be Bluetooth, wireless, or wired like I'm using today. Where we're able to hold a conversation over Teams via that methodology. You can buy standard handsets, and we'll go over some vendors here in a minute, but Microsoft does have an approved list of vendors that allows you to pick from a certain subset of phones that offer the full suite of Microsoft functionalities and allows you to use them on a standard handset, just like you would with a Cisco, Mitel system that you've had in the past. And obviously the mobile device support as well. One of the nice things about mobile device support that a lot of people don't really realize, but it's kind of a nice feature, is that you can make telephone calls through the Teams app on your mobile device, and it will show up as your Teams number. So if you're providing office numbers to BYOD devices, they can use their BYOD devices to use their office number to call out and in from a caller ID perspective and not use their personal cell phone numbers. All of this voice routing is done through the voice section that's done strictly in Teams on the cloud perspective, and you can set up multiple ways to do that. So inside Microsoft on a native route, you have what's called calling plans, and basically that allows you to select a pool of minutes that your users can use as an organization for either domestic or international call plans based on the need of your business. And I've seen both used in very wide arrays based on how many people you have to call and what your audience is as far as those phone calls have to go. And a little bit later on in the deck, you will notice we will talk about the licensing costs and what it actually entails to set up these calling plans. Okay. Direct routing. So direct routing, I mentioned a little bit earlier, its primary use in our current implementation of Teams from Microsoft is the integration of Teams to on-prem. So one of the biggest things you can do is you can use virtually with most PST trunks that are out there to make a connection into the Microsoft phone system. Now we say most because obviously there are a lot of phone providers out there today. Most of your major names, Avaya, Cisco, Mitel, will all have integrations into Teams as far as enterprise voice is concerned. Now certain providers such as Cisco do have some special configurations you have to set up to make those connections, but it is absolutely possible. Now, one of the nice things that is, as far as what it offers to you guys in your organizations is it offers a hybrid way of deploying Teams. Two big use cases come to mind as far as how we get a lot of clients ask about how to get around this or how to utilize this solution. One, most notably, one is you might be in a current contract, and it might be still for a couple of years with an older phone system, and you're wanting to upgrade to some of the more modern type of ways to do telephone systems, but you're still locked into your contract. You can set up a hybridization with Teams to allow you to set a subset of users to just as a trial run, almost like an extended POC. Allow them to use the Teams numbers and Teams functionality, still allow the cross-routing traffic, still allow transferring back and forth, and everything that you would have from your on-premise providers to be able to use that full functionality going forward. Or on the flip side, there is another way this we use as well. So if you notice later on down here on this slide, it mentions your organization might require connections to third-party devices. We have a lot of people that use audio codes devices or specific proprietary phone calling equipment that is needed for specific applications or because of the nature of their unique call center needs. And in that case, you can use Teams to expand what you currently already have. You might want to use Microsoft calling plans. You might want to use features of Microsoft and not strictly stick with whatever provider you have today. And this allows you some flexibility and functionality to be able to integrate those two in a long-term or short-term scenario based on whether you're just trying it out or whether you want to expand it as you may be acquiring new businesses or expanding the business to new sites or what have you. Okay, moving on from there, we do have the call flow in Microsoft Teams. Two big features I want to spend some time talking about on here is auto attendance and call queues. Many of you might be very familiar with the auto attendant functionality. Now, Microsoft is fairly new to the game on the auto attendant functionality. They've only had it in place for about 2.5, 3 years now. but it does allow you the option to fully customize Auto Attendant in Microsoft Teams, whether as an automated message or automatic routing for incoming user-based calls. On a menu option to press 1 to go here, press 2 to go here. You can use it for that. Or you can use the auto attendant to automatically route the calls based on your time of day. If it's after hours, route it to an on-call person or route it to a voicemail system. Or if there's a holiday, communicate that message that you're off and then route to a voicemail system. Call queues, very similar to a lot of functionality you have on-prem from a call center type functionality, where you have an analogous waiting room where somebody would call into this call queue, and they are basically placed on hold for a matter of a few seconds while the system looks to see who is available in the queue. Now, I say this with a little bit of trepidation because there's many different ways to set this up. There are ways you can do it automatically, where a call queue simply pulls all the users that are in that particular group and rings them simultaneously. You can have it to where users can opt out of calls. So if they're on a call, they can opt out of a call and they won't receive calls until they manually opt into a call again. Another option that Todd, my engineer, will show you guys in a little while is you can actually set it up through groups as well and have a dynamic autonomous group that then adds and removes people based on an on-call schedule to handle all that for you. Call queues can also be used for reception group basis as well. So if you have a call queue that you want to use for a specific type of accountants, customer service reps, things like that, can be fully customized for a unique use that may not necessarily be strictly call center driven. Call queues themselves also offer very customized on-hold music and announcements. So if you want to have a specific message played, or if you want to have a specific on-hold music played while they're waiting for the call queue to pick up, you can do so. I've even had plenty of clients that don't want an on-hold music. They just simply want it to have a phone call ringing for the client when they come in to indicate that they're still waiting for a call to be answered, and that can be done as well. Okay. Moving on from there, and I know this is a fairly convoluted call flow diagram, so I'm going to talk through some of this. But basically, these are the different ways it can be configured, and this is not all of this at once. This is all a la carte, can be configured in multiple different ways based on how you want it routed. So calls can come in from an existing PBX system, which you'll see over here on the left for the PSTN cloud, into the cloud PBX system, and then routed however you would like it to be. You can have the calls routed to an auto attendant. The auto attendant then does the messaging and the auto routing, and then it could go directly to a user's number. Or you can route it to a call group or a call queue to route to specific users if need be. One of the nice cool features about this is there's customizations you can do as far as the voicemailing goes as well. You can set up to individual voicemail boxes to be set up for individual users, or as you'll see down the bottom right, you can set up a reception group mailbox for voicemails to where multiple users can then access that voicemail system, and it isn't simply tied to just one user. Instead, it's tied to a group. And all that can be routed based on what user's DID is coming in, what business hours you have set up, all how that auto attendant is routing it.
And if I may add, Mike, so
Sure.
For that, the way that the group voicemail actually works is it goes to a group in Office 365. So actually everyone gets a notification in that group when the voicemail is sent, and they get an email notification. So with that, you can hook into even more automation if you'd like. Like you can hook it into flows in Office 365. You could take that message and post it to Teams if you really wanted to get funky with it. There's all kinds of functionality that you can add on top of that group membership.
Excellent. Thank you, Todd. All right, moving on from there. Okay. Now we have Microsoft Teams advanced feature sets. Now, I probably am assuming that a lot of you have heard of a lot of the feature sets we've talked about thus far. So it might be a recap for you or a review, or maybe just an expansion on what you already know. These advanced feature sets, many of you may know, but some of you might be new information too. So I'm happy to take any questions on these as well at the end of this presentation before we move into the demo. So the first feature set we're going to talk about is Teams Rooms. This is something we do get asked about quite a bit, and it's how to expand your conferencing capabilities, whether it be small huddle areas, as you see on here, or large conference rooms. It gives you the ability to deploy a conference room style of interface without having to use standardized phones or anything like that. The setup is very, very, robust. You can do it through television screens or large monitors. Now, several providers that you'll see here on the list include Yealink, Logitech, Crestron, Polycom, Lenovo, and HP, and there are a few others. that offer prepackaged Teams rooms systems where they give you the HD webcam, they allow you to have the monitor, and you get all the conferencing equipment with regards to the desk phones as well as the conferencing bridge systems and satellite devices as well. However, you don't have to. You can set this up on your own. You can set up and enroll your own Microsoft Teams room and utilize equipment that you might already have on premise, or maybe you'll need to purchase one or two items. Now, obviously, the full feature set of Teams will be obviously customizable and will only be available to things that are fully Teams Enterprise Voice certified. However, just calling into the conference number and allowing for conference chat and video chat, that's virtually available anywhere with most devices that allow you to do video conferencing. Compatible devices. So this is, again, another topic point we bring up quite a bit. So Microsoft has done a lot in the last 2 years to really refine the amount of list of devices that it's actually supported on their Teams environment. If you would have had these conversations a couple of years ago, I would have told you there would have been 25 providers and roughly about 65 different devices that were available that were fully Microsoft Skype for Business and Teams certified phones. Nowadays, that list is a little bit less. So you can still use your smartphones and tablets. Any Android device or iOS device supports this as well for any type of Teams functionality. And that's the full suite. You can use it for Teams video calling. You can use it for screen shares. You can use it for collaboration sessions. I do it quite frequently on my Android device all the time. Workstations are much the same way. They are basically considered a soft client of the phone. They'll give you probably the most functionality and feature sets out of any of the devices because you'll get the wide breadth of Microsoft full set of functionalities, not to mention integration with OneDrive and SharePoint directly from your PC. And of course, the IP phones as well. So Microsoft does have a list, and it's a fairly extensive list. We decided not to include it on this presentation, but I'm happy to share it with anybody if you'd like a list of all the phones that are supported. And there's a list of about 30 or 40 phones that are supported nowadays from about 5 or 6 different providers. Now, I will say that they range wildly in price, anywhere from the $150 range all the way up to the $700, $800 range for handsets. And really what you get is the difference in the functionality and feature sets. The lower grade devices really just give you base feature sets as far as calling in and out goes, not really any video chat or whatnot. However, if you notice on the upper right, that's one of the higher grade devices that you can get out there that offers full video conferencing over a handset device without the use of a laptop or a tablet. Okay, moving on from there, we have advanced communications. So many of you over the course of 2020, obviously with the pandemic, and especially if you have kids in school, might be fairly familiar with some of these feature sets. So Microsoft has rolled out a lot of advanced communications feature sets to allow for larger audiences or more tailored type of communication beyond just a standard conference room. And one of the biggest things there is Teams live events. So live events are something that you can host for up to 20,000 participants, whereas you can have interactive meetings up to 1,000 participants. Now, I want to talk about the differences between those two. So Teams live events, if you're not familiar with those, it's essentially what we're doing today, where I am presenting to you guys a presentation over a specific type of content, but users are not allowed to talk. They're not allowed to open up their mics or talk in the particular type of environment, and it's just there for consumption of the data. A moderator role in those live events that can then watch chat and look for questions and bring them up as needed. But they're really a moderated event that just allows the presenter to get the content out. Really good for large presentations, town hall meetings, company-wide events, things like that. Interactive meetings, more like what we're doing today, can support up to 1,000 users. And that's where they allow us to communicate back and forth and collaborate and do everything that we're doing basically in any Teams meeting you're normally allowed to do. You can customize this in a lot of different feature sets. Many of you have probably noticed both on the collaboration side and if you're using Enterprise Voice on that side as well, the customizations are getting more and more robust almost on a daily basis. Microsoft is adding a lot more customer-facing functionality. And for those of you that have done your research, you'll probably notice that Microsoft Teams and Zoom are competing very heavily on those different feature sets. And as of this moment today, the feature sets are almost identical between the two. As far as the customization, the user interface presence and things like that, whereas obviously Teams has a lot more robust security feature sets on them when compared to Zoom, but they do offer the same user in-game interface and ease of access for your users. One of the biggest things that maybe not a lot of you take advantage of if you're using Teams Enterprise Voice is that last bullet point there, which is manage your organization's communications. You can monitor, track, and analyze data for users. And this comes in multiple different areas. You can look at general metrics for the call quality, which we'll go over here in the demo in a little bit, as far as what that actually means. Or you can track individual analytics from a user base. Find out how many calls they're making in a time period. What's their average call time? Where are these calls going? And what was the quality of those calls as they came in and out? A lot of analytics there, and Microsoft is also increasing the support for these analytic and reporting workspaces into Power BI to allow for a more robust dashboarding process as well. Okay, audio conferencing. So audio conferencing is slightly different from some of the things we've talked about already. So audio conferencing, we've talked about video conferencing and Teams meetings. Both of those operate off of a mostly video type format. There is an audio only offering as well. So when your internet connectivity is limited, you might be in the car and you may not be on 5G. You can certainly use this option where you dial into a conference bridge just like you would with any other type of conference system out there. And you can use a standard PSTN phone call into a conference and talk to your team that way. It does fully support Bluetooth devices, and it might make it a little bit easier if your internet quality or your network your network bandwidth isn't really good at the site that you're at for that particular time. We find this particular very helpful for a lot of organizations that have satellite locations, such as construction companies, might have construction sites where internet is it's satellite, and if it is, it's hit or miss, and this might be a better option for those to at least be able to join those meetings. So, biggest question I usually get asked a lot at the end of kind of bringing a lot of these big presentations is, how much does it cost? And what you see on the screen right there is what it costs to be able to license for the environment based on certain scenarios. Now, this is not cumulative. This is all a la carte, and it's based on how you want to do it. So basically, once Teams is set up from a collaboration standpoint, and it's all set up in your environment and users can use the collaboration fees, these would be the additional charges after that to be able to get enterprise voice set up. And I'll do a quick breakdown of these. So the phone system actually costs $8 per user per month. That does allow you to sign, numbers to users and allows them to use just the phone system functionality. Now, the next cost that comes in addition to that is the calling plan. So the calling plan is where you get 3,000 minutes a month, and that's where you're able to use a domestic calling plan or international for $12 or $24 a month. So then what you would do is your user would get a license for them, and then you'd purchase a calling plan or multiple calling plans based on the size of your organization to be able to support the amount of minutes needed to be able to handle the users as they're calling in and out. Now you'll notice there's a virtual license down there for virtual users. So users are also set up for things like conference bridges and also for auto attendants and things like that. User licensing for those automated service accounts is actually free. However, you still have to pay for the numbers and the actual usage of hosting those numbers. So for instance, if you're doing a Teams room and you're doing the actual Teams room deployment, that's $15 per month per room. Advanced communications such as like Teams live events and things like that are additional $12 a month per user. And audio conferencing, just simply having audio bridge capability with a dial-in number is $4 a month. Now, one thing I want to clarify here, because we get asked this a lot, is those last two per user in your organization? No, that's actually not the way those work. So for advanced communications and audio conferencing, if you're setting up a Teams live event or a conference bridge, it is only that cost per month for a user that's going to host the number. So for instance, if you're going to have a standard user that's going to host your conferencing bridge for all of your conference rooms, say you've only got 3 conference rooms, then it might only be just one time $4 to house that one number. Same with live events. If your marketing person is doing live events and they're only going to do one a month, then maybe only one of those is needed. But basically, you would need one of those licenses for every time you're going to host an event. And if you're going to host concurrent events, obviously you'll need another one. Okay. And moving into the last section here, it says the Oakwood Enterprise Voice Implementation Plan. So it's our process that we take when we're going into and deploying enterprise voice in an organization and how we basically handle various aspects of it. Having done quite a few of these with hundreds of different clients, there's a wide array of issues you run into. And for those of you that, being transparent, who have dealt with 2020 with Teams Enterprise Voice, it's not with its share of hurdles back and forth, as is Cisco and as is all the other providers out there with this year, just with the huge influx of the users really migrating to this platform due to remote work and things like that. So our process in this diagram you'll see here is really a 4-stage process. We go through 4 different phases, and you'll see in our project work that I will lay out here in a minute. We go through identify phase, design phase, a build phase, and deploy phase. And they are very distinct methodologies there. And there's also times within each one of those where we will come back to the clients for approval and talk about design changes and things like that. So moving on to the next one actually gives a better explanation of what we actually do in each process. So in the identify phase, we oftentimes will meet with business or strategic leaders to help them plan out what the call flow is going to be. What is the desired state? Like, how do you want call flow to run for your users? Do you want a certain division of your users to be in a conferencing mode or a call center type of situation? Or do you have a receptionist that needs to route to specific people? That will be diagrammed out in a whiteboarding session and then obviously built into a design diagram that we'll then talk about in a later phase. One point that we put on here pretty quickly is this is also the time when we start porting over the numbers. For those of you that haven't dealt with enterprise voice or even any provider for that matter from porting number perspective, it usually takes a couple of days to port over a number. And in 2020, it can take even longer than that. I've seen porting of numbers take as long as 2 weeks. So once it's identified that a number needs to be moved over from one provider to another, especially if you want to keep a large subset of your numbers on premise into the cloud, then we start that process early to make sure it gets done and scheduled ahead of time. I will say that Microsoft does schedule these cutovers, so we can work with you on scheduling to be able to decide when the best dates are going to be, or Microsoft will let you know when the best day is going to be to cut these numbers over. In the design phase, we spent a lot of time going over all the information that was gathered in the identify phase and labeling that out in a design document. This will show call flow. It will show any type of hybridization connectivity from an infrastructure basis if you're connecting back to on-prem PSTN solutions, as well as doing a presentation to you all in your organization to talk over to make sure everybody's on the same page. This is the design and call flow you're looking to do and the desired state of the functionality. Once we move past that, we move into the build phase. And then the build phase is once everything's agreed upon, this is where the building of the core infrastructure comes into place. Call queues are built out, auto attendants are set up. If you're doing advanced call set features, especially like Teams rooms or live events feature sets or getting set up for conference bridges, all that's done at that time as well. Typically in the build phase and stabilize phase is when we start doing test user bases, where we identify a test group of beta users and start doing test deployments with them and testing out all the call center feature sets that are available. Stabilize continues the testing process as well as making updates based on feedback. There might be a change in the organization on how they want to do something or changes that we found just to the state of your current phone system. There might be modifications that may need to be made to the design. So we make those changes during that time. And finally, move into the deploy phase. The deploy phase is really what I consider the production phase. And this is where we've done all the testing and the users have vetted out the solution and we're looking at moving company-wide everyone into the cloud to use Teams Enterprise Voice. It uses the production methodology with communications that happen days and weeks beforehand with common scenarios that would happen when things move over as far as differences in how the interface looks. It also comes with some training for the help desk team to allow it to support your users once people are moved over. And then obviously with a go live date and deployment. Now, obviously that's subject to change whether we're doing a full deployment of users or a hybridization with a current PSTN on-prem. Okay, so for the presentation portion, I want to thank you guys for attending this part of it. I do want to open it up to anybody who has any questions at this point about anything we went over, and I'm happy to go back to any slides before we move on to the demo section. So does anybody have any questions or discussion points they'd like to bring up? Okay, I will take your silence as meaning that you guys are...
Just talk it out if you want to hear it.
What was that?
Oh, wait, hang on.
Okay. Well, then with that being said, we will move on to Todd Rhodes, who is going to do our demo on the Enterprise Voice tenant and kind of show you some of how it's configured.
Yeah, so I'm going to go over some of the feature sets that Michael's gone over, but I'm going to show you what they look like under the hood and what you can do with them. So the first feature set that we're going to go over is called a call queue. And when you think of a call queue, just think of a call center. Essentially, you have agents who all receive the call at once, and they can choose whether to answer the call or not. So essentially, this is our call queue that we have for our managed services group here at Oakwood. And our managed services group, they manage various systems for various clients. So this is actually a VIP line that we have for them. That's 24/7. So whenever there's an emergency, our clients can call this number and get a hold of an actual person day or night. So the way that call queues and auto attendants work is they have to have what's called a resource account. That's just another name for a service account. And you have to assign that service account a number. So what you can do with the call queue is you can assign various service accounts to one call queue. So let's say I had 10 different numbers that I all wanted to point to the same place. I would just create 10 service accounts and point them all to this call queue. Now in our case, we only have one number that we use. Now with the call queue, you can also set up greetings. And this is kind of good, especially in 2020. Because it's good for announcements, because what happens is the greeting plays and then the call is routed to the call group. So I've seen doctors' offices use this for their COVID procedures. So what we would do is we would upload an audio file of that greeting, of that announcement. Then that greeting would play and then the call would be routed. So for call routing, you have basically two different methods that you can choose. You can either add just users. So I could add individual users to this call queue and they would all receive the call when someone called in this call queue, or I can do it based on group membership. Now for us, for this call queue, group membership is the best way to go because this is an on-call call queue. So we don't want to ring everybody in managed services. We just want to ring the group that's on call for that week. So the reason why I have it set up this way is so that end users, they don't have to go into the call queue and actually add and remove users if they want to change who's on call. They just have to change membership to this group. So it simplifies everything for us to do it that way. Now, in terms of actually how you route the call, there's several different ways you can do it. But the most common way is attendant routing. And basically what that does is everybody gets the call. So when I call into this call queue, it rings all the agents at once. And that's the way most clients want it, just because they don't care who answers it. They just want someone to pick up. Now you can do serial routing, where if I had a group of users here, a list here, it would ring them one by one. It would ring the first user, and if they didn't answer after whatever the timeout is, whether it be 30 or 60 seconds, then it'd go to the next person. You can also do round robin, where basically everyone gets the same amount of calls during the day. So it looks at the call group and says, oh, Jan, she only got 3 calls today, and everybody else got 6 or 7. So we're going to push all the calls to her until she's even with everybody. Now you want to do that if you have some sort of metrics. Like there's some companies that they want their agents to answer a set number of calls per day. So you could use round robin if you need that. And longest idle is based on the person's presence. So basically, if you have a user who's been away longer than everybody else, then it's going to ring that user first. And it's going to go through the list based on who's been idle in Teams the longest. You can also turn off presence-based routing. Basically what that is it looks at your presence in Teams, whether you're busy or on a call, and it routes based on that. So if a user's busy, then it won't ring them. Now, since this is an emergency call queue, I have that turned off, obviously, because I want everybody to be ring at the same time. You can also set how long it rings for each agent. Now, for us, this doesn't matter because we ring everybody at the same time. But if we were going through the list through serial routing, then this would be more important. And then you also have maximum calls in the call queue that you can set. Now for us, this isn't a big deal since it's an emergency line. We won't be getting more than 50 calls. But you also do have call timeout. So basically you can tell it what happens if a user's been in the call queue for 1 minute, what happens. Now we have an auto attendant that we have set up that goes to voicemail, if that's the case. That's not the way you have to do it. You can actually redirect to several other scenarios. So if you want to, you can redirect to another call queue. If you have a backup call queue, you could redirect to that. You can even redirect to external phone numbers. So if you want to redirect to a user's cell phone at one point, you can do that. There's a lot that you can do with call queues. So let's go ahead and look at auto attendants. So auto attendants, basically, they do exactly that. They answer the calls for you, and you can program what happens based on certain scenarios. So this is our call queue, our auto attendant for Oakwood, and these are all the numbers that point to it. So basically, we can look at what happens if someone calls this call queue. So one thing that I can do is I can enable voice inputs. And I can program those voice inputs to do certain things. Like if I wanted to program, if someone says accounting, then it goes to the accounting department. I can program that using voice inputs. So this is our basic call flow. So like with call queues, you can choose whether you play an audio file or a greeting if you want some kind of announcement. In our case, we don't have it because we want it just to direct to our reception group. And you can also set what happens during certain hours. Now for us, we have our call flow set to be the same 24/7, but if you wanted to, you could set it to only do this call flow up here during certain hours of the day or certain days of the week. And just like with business hours call flow, you can set greetings and you can set what happens. Now, the reason why I have it set to disconnect is because no one will ever be directed to after flow or after hours call flow for us because we have our business call flow open 24/7. Now, another cool thing that you can do is you can add holidays. So it's not just based on days of the week. You can set it based on days of the year. So you can have special custom Christmas greetings or New Year's greetings. You could even have a custom Halloween greeting. I've seen users do this not just for like days that they're not working, but also every holiday has its own greeting, even though it goes through the same call flow as a normal business day. They just have special customized greetings based on the month or holiday of the year, which is kind of cool. Now dial scope is kind of cool too, because with these auto attendants, you can also dial by name. So if I'm calling Oakwood and I know that I want to talk to Michael and I don't want to talk to a receptionist, I just want to go straight to Michael, I can say Michael Kaler into the auto attendant and it's going to route me to him. So obviously you can clamp down on the scope of that. So if you wanted to, you could only search, the directory would only search for certain users in a certain group. So if I had an auto attendant that was only for accounting, then I would add my accounting group here. And then the auto attendant, whenever someone tried to dial by name, would only search the accounting group. And then resource accounts are those service accounts that we talked about. Now you do have to assign a license to these accounts, but the license is free, as Michael said. So are there any questions so far? We'll take your silence as a no. And we'll go ahead and look at caller ID real quick. So with caller ID, I can basically set caller ID policies for my users basically with three options. So I can use the user's actual DID that they have in Teams, or I can choose a service number. Now, a lot of clients choose a service number because they want all calls to show the mainline caller ID. Now at Oakwood, we don't have that because we like our clients to be able to call us directly, but there are a lot of organizations that opt in for the service number. So you can create various policies for various groups and assign them to each user individually. So you could have a group, you could have a policy for all of your Kansas City employees that when they dial out, it shows the Kansas City number. Or all of your St. Louis employees will show the St. Louis number when they dial out. Also, you can look at call quality, as Michael alluded to. So this is our call quality dashboard. Actually, I have it pulled up here. So this is all based on network quality. So basically what it looks at is network packet loss and also network jitter, and it will tell you if your users are having any issues. Now this isn't a per user, these aren't per user metrics. This is all aggregated. So this is my entire organization. Now if I wanted to, I could upload my building data. So basically I could upload data for the St. Louis office or the Kansas City office, and then I could splice this data out based on building. So then I could segregate the data further and say, okay, it looks like my Kansas City office is having issues. Maybe I should look at the network there or call the ISP, see if there's some kind of issue there. You can also look at call quality on a per user basis. So if I go to my users, I can look at, for example, I can look at Michael's call quality over the past week. So if I look here, over the past week, Mike's had 53 good calls and 3 poor calls. Now, these metrics aren't based on network metrics. They're actually based on user surveys. So if you guys notice, a lot of times when you make a Teams call, they'll have a pop-up that says rate your call, and they'll have you rate it from 1 to 5 stars. That's what this quality is based on.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to chime in here real quick, Todd.
Go for it.
One clarification I want to bring up is I get a lot of questions about how call quality is actually measured. And like Todd said, it really is network-based. So with that being said, is if a user's having difficulties like their head's too far away from the microphone, or they're calling on a Bluetooth device that isn't connecting properly, it's not going to pick up call quality issues like that. It's only going to pick up if the network connectivity between the devices or if the UDP traffic for a PSTN call is degraded in some way. So it's connection-based only, not user experience-based.
Exactly. And I can go through and look at a user's call history also and ask them which calls they were having issues with. And maybe that'll give me some metrics. Oh, maybe all 3 of Michael's calls were to the same person. So then I can talk to that person and see if they're having any network issues. So this can give you further metrics into what's going on into your system. Also, I wanted to show you guys the IP phones and devices. So you can actually manage all of these from the admin portal. So you can look at a device and you can push updates to it. You can see if it's having any issues. And it's pretty robust. So I can look at just this device, and I can look at the call quality on that device. I can see any network issues it might be having. I can look at any firmware issues that it might be having, see if it needs an update. So if a user calls in and says, hey, my phone's not working, this is the first thing I'm going to look at and say, oh, it looks like you need an update. Or I could even restart it from the portal if I needed to. So it's pretty robust what you can do with the team certified devices. I believe that's it for the demo. I don't want to go too much in the weeds with you guys because there's a lot we can go over, but
yeah, definitely appreciate that, Todd. So I want to thank everybody for attending our presentation today. Does anybody have any additional questions or conversation points, because we do have a few minutes left, that you want to talk about before we adjourn?
I have a couple.
Sure, Brian, go ahead.
So the first one is paging. So we're in a manufacturing environment, and we have people out on the shop floor. can it hook to like a Valcom paging system?
It can. So there's no inherent paging directly with inside Teams, but you can integrate to third-party systems to allow that paging to happen. Now, the control of the paging will still be done through the third-party system. So you'll have to set
Well,
up all
when you say third-party system, what does that mean?
basically a third-party on-premise device that would handle that.
Okay, so a Valcom
Yeah,
unit,
a Valcom.
an
Yeah,
amplifier would be okay.
correct.
Okay. The second one, we are in the subtropolis in Kansas City, so we're literally in a cave. We don't get cell service, and we don't allow some of our forklift drivers and some of our other people to have their cell phones out on the floor, but we want to communicate. Is there a Wi-Fi enabled phone that can be used with this system?
There is actually. So on the list, which I can provide everybody here, that on the approved devices, there are some of them that are Wi-Fi capable. I will be honest with you, they're not the cheaper ones. They're higher up on the list, and I believe their price point starts at about the 300 range.
Oh,
And obviously
that's no big,
yeah, they also come with the caveat of obviously you're running off of Wi-Fi, so you're at the mercy of how strong your Wi-Fi signal is.
correct. And then the last quick question, I hate to take everybody else's time. The failover, a premise failover. So we got 7 locations, but we really only have one operator, and one receptionist, and she is in the cave with us. But if we lose connectivity in the cave without using it, and maybe it's the auto attendant, can we have a failover to another location if Teams cannot ping that subnet?
Yes, you can. It's not an automated process yet. It is something you would have to configure manually inside the portal. The actual changes to do so take just minutes to do. However, I will say based on Microsoft's high volume and the amount of requests they're getting right now, it does take usually a couple of hours for the settings to fully bake in.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. Anybody else have any questions they'd like to bring up?
I do have a question.
Sure, go for it, Derek.
We have a ACD system in our call center currently, and they do a lot of reporting and tracking of phone calls. So how many calls come in on this telephone number, and so forth and so forth. What kind of availability do they have in Teams at this point?
So
for that?
actually, that's a really good question. It is one of the things that we did not demo today because it gets a little bit deeper into the weeds on this, but there actually is a reporting mechanism you can do to do much more granular call reporting. It's used primarily for troubleshooting or for research into specific types of either call issues or call incidents, but you can do reportings by that at a much more granular level. Now, it's not going to tell you obviously the content that was on the call. It just gives you better metrics on how the call is actually being recorded. Now you can record calls. It's a whole different thing, and it's a side topic. But as far as the actual reporting on individual metrics on numbers, you can do that.
Okay.
I see, Brian, you got another question?
Yes, I did. Sorry.
Sure.
On that pricing, you had $12 a user per month for 3,000 minutes. Is that an aggregate for your organization, or is that per person? Because if we got one user who talks maybe for 5 minutes a month, I don't necessarily want to buy 3,000 minutes for him, but we have another user who uses it a ton and may get 5,000 minutes. Is that an aggregate for the whole organization, or am I going to have to pay $12 for every single user who ever wants to talk to a cell phone or a POTS line?
That's a great question. Todd, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So actually the minutes are aggregated for everybody. So they're not aggregated for everybody in your organization, but they're aggregated for everybody that has a calling plan. So let's say if Mike and I had a calling plan together, our organization would be paying $24 a month for both of us, but our organization as a whole would have 6,000 minutes to divide between Mike and I.
Okay, so if anybody needs to make a call, even if it's 1 minute, they need to be a part of the plan, but all the numbers, the minute numbers, get grouped together for everybody who has the plan.
Yes.
Okay.
And obviously that doesn't bode true for any of the service numbers you have for like auto attendants and stuff. It's strictly just users themselves.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions for the group or anything? Okay. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for joining our presentation today. I'm happy to send out any of this deck of information or additional information if you'd like to know more. And if you'd, like to get in more information on what we do with those engagements or help you to, migrate your phone systems or even integrate with an existing one, feel free to reach out to myself or Tim Hoxma, who actually sent out the invite for this, who is our marketing engineer. And I want to thank everybody for joining.